We want to get you back into your pods. So those of you who turn to face forward now need to turn back the other way. And want to give you the opportunity to think about some cases involving academic integrity. And we'll do that in a way so that you can then ask questions, and some of the questions that I put off from before about academic integrity and issues of cheating and plagiarism. You know that academic integrity is an important value of the institution. Students should be evaluated on their own work, the work that they have done. We expect that the work students turn in is their own work. And that when you're grading it, you are grading that student's work, or when the faculty member is grading it. And that's important both as part of the learning process and for the integrity of the degrees that you're all going to get, that this is a place where people should know that if you have a degree from Case Western Reserve University, you earned it. And you earned it on the basis of your own work. So we have 6 scenarios, and we're going to ask you to discuss amongst yourselves some of those based on your groups. So for the recitation leaders, how many groups of recitation leaders do we have? 1, 2. Okay. 3. Good. Okay. Scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3. Okay? The lab instructors, there are 2 groups or 3 groups? 2 groups? Okay. 6 and 1. Oh, no, I'm sorry, 6 and 4. Okay, and then we have the graders. How many groups of graders? 1 group, 2 groups, 3 groups, 4 groups? 5 groups? 5, okay. 1, 2, 6, 5, 1. Did everybody get a group? Okay. This way you can focus your discussion on one case, and we'll report back on as many of them as we have time.
And then alert the instructor if there's like a phone or something. Yeah.
Okay, confiscate the phone and the exam and alert the instructor as soon as you can.
Yeah.
Others who had that scenario, your thoughts? Others who didn't have that scenario, be interested in your thoughts as well. Yes.
Thank you. So we said something a little more like letting the instructor handle it. So if I said if we saw it, I think we said you'd walk up to the student, stern look on your face, you tell them, put your phone away. We told you to put your phones away at the beginning of the exam. I mean, I guess get their name and tell them if you see it again, you will take their exam, and then go tell the instructor. Was there something else? Like we said something else. Oh yeah, tell them to come see you after class. But like otherwise the instructor could.
So
if
the same steps, but in a tiered way.
Sure.
Others. Okay. Okay. Taking the phone away to put up in the front of the room, taking the phone, asking the student to put the phone away. That was the first step. Any thoughts about which of those you'd prefer? You think would be a better way to deal with it? Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't want to do anything to the kid because that might cause a scene in a 500-person lecture. Hello, thank you. What I might just do is ask the student for their case ID. That's it. That's the only interaction you'd have with the kid, and then talk to your instructor.
Okay. Other thoughts? Let me suggest some pros and cons of various various of those approaches. Because I certainly understand the not wanting to be disruptive to that student completing the exam, and you don't want to be disruptive to other students who are taking the exam. So that would be something to do. There may be a question that comes up in talking about the case of whether the student was looking at, says here that the student should not have the phone out, and that would be an academic integrity violation in and of itself if those are the instructions. But in some cases the phone is out, and it's a matter of what the student was referring to during the exam. So by taking the phone, and if you do take the phone, you put it on the table up front where everyone can see that you're not doing anything with the phone, you're simply putting it aside. But that student may come up to you afterwards and say, look, I can show you that I was open to something totally unrelated. I was not cheating. Okay, again, it could be cheating in and of itself if the instructions were, don't do that. But those instructions are often not given, and the phone is out so that students can check the time or whatever. You see this, but you don't see exactly what the student is looking for. You don't want to start being disruptive by asking to see it on the spot. Taking the phone, having it up front, is a way that the student can then come to you and say, look, I can show you exactly what I was looking at with the phone, because there hasn't been an opportunity to erase, to change screens, or do anything like that. The one thing I'd like to recommend against is taking the exam away from the student. If the student is found not to be responsible for an academic integrity violation, you still need to have an exam to be graded, right? So I would urge you to let the student complete the exam, take note of when in the exam, if you happen to notice what page of the exam the student was up to, take note of that. So take good notes to document what you saw and what you, what you did, what you saw the student do, how you handled it, so that you can turn those over to the head of the course. But let the student finish the exam. And so you want to do it in a way that is as non-disruptive as possible. See if there are questions that you wish to pursue a little further.
I think if you're not sure what the policy is for your course, and you know that this is a likelihood that it or could happen, then you just check with your faculty member again, or your instructor of record, or whoever the head of course is, and ask what the policy is. Is that something that was announced to everybody? All of us are human, and all of us forget. So as an instructor of record, if I'm teaching a class for the 5th time and I forget one of the things that I've talked about in the past 4 semesters, I'm human. I made a mistake. So it's having, again, open lines of communication between you as the TA and your faculty member can be really helpful. You may have seen something in another faculty member's class that's really helpful. Some people have little taped grids on a table somewhere, and everybody puts their phone there when they come in because there's no tech in that class. And just share that with a faculty member, and they may say, I don't like that idea. Oh, well, no harm, no foul. You still, were able to kind of contribute to maybe something that would be helpful.
Okay. And a student may have an emergency situation at home for which they might need to have their phone. They can leave the phone at the front, and they should seat themselves in a way that if that phone rings, you can signal to the student and they can get themselves over there to hear from mom or dad about whatever that emergency situation is. So that can be handled without violating the principle that they shouldn't have their materials out. Okay, scenario 2. Over here and someplace over there. Okay, yes. So scenario 2, hanging out. Student approaches you, tells you they really enjoyed your class and would like to meet off campus to continue course discussions. Yes.
Okay, so we said that we would try to redirect the request and just tell them to come to office hours, or like recitations, or like some sort of meeting on campus would even be appropriate, like in like the library or something like that. Because like it kind of grades the line between like the TA student relationship and we would only report it to a faculty member if it's like threatening or like sexual or like persistent. Like if you say no and they keep insisting something like that, then we would report it.
Okay. Other thoughts? Okay. So we talked about some of that already in some ways. Yes.
I'd tell them to, if they can, just come to my office hours.
Right. If you have office hours in a particular place on campus, then they wish to continue discussing the material, they can. That's what office hours are for. Okay. But again, keeping it on campus, keeping it in a professional setting like the library, like a classroom building, like the department lounge, whatever it is a good way to handle that. If it goes further and becomes more extreme and begins to violate other policies, handle that with the course instructor. Okay. Who had number 3? Over there. Okay, number 3, during a quiz, okay, you see the student using a hidden note page, which apparently wasn't very well hidden. You decide it would be best to let the student finish the quiz, but you immediately and politely ask for the note page. And the student is visibly upset and becomes loud and disruptive. What are you going to do?
So to de-escalate the situation, we could ask the student to leave or just stop talking, because if you don't say anything, they're not going to be screaming for the entire duration of the quiz.
Okay. Other thoughts? Okay. Ask the student to leave, stop responding, and let the student finish venting, and we'll stop of their own response. Other ideas? Everyone agrees with that? Yes.
I would put it simply that everyone, like the authorities, well, me and the instructor are aware that the person was using a note page, and if you don't give it to me, then your quiz is not going to be graded. So, because that's academic integrity violation.
Right. Okay. So let me suggest that if the person is not supposed to, this is about being clear at the start of the exam, what the student's supposed to have and not have. And if you're not supposed to have anything out, and everything is in your backpack, and perhaps backpacks are off to the side of the room or under the desk, but nothing should be out, there shouldn't be a scene with, that arises out of asking to take that material. You don't need to go any further at that point. Put it in the front where it can easily be retrieved at the end, and you can have the conversation about the behavior at the end. Okay? This TA did what I think is the appropriate thing. Let the student complete the exam. Take note of when the student, what point in the quiz the student, you confiscated the material. Confiscate sounds more confrontational than I mean for it to sound at that point. If the student is disruptive, explain that you can discuss this later, or if the student prefers, you can discuss it outside of the lecture hall. Take them out of the room to finish the conversation. But you don't want to be interfering with other students' ability to take the exam. Yes, there was a question or comment. Excuse me? Aye, okay.
Got it.
Other thoughts on number 3?
De-escalating things that kind of start to rise up in class, or when people's emotions get involved, is easier said than done, right? Especially when you're working with your peers. And the same thing happens sometimes, unfortunately, with faculty working with colleagues. And you just have to remind yourself that in your role as a TA, it's a business thing. It is a thing where you have a particular role. In that particular instance, they're not your friends. In that particular circumstance, they're your students who are in that particular class that you're working with. And, we can talk about this later, or not saying anything at all, but just not buying into kind of the emotional heat that's going into that at the time is one of the best ways to kind of just let that fizzle out. Because like you said, at some point the wick and the candle will be gone and there won't be anything else to burn at that point. But it's hard sometimes. I think our egos get involved, and my personal thing. I've been wronged, and I have to. Nah, that's ego.
Right.
Just turn that off for the moment, and just let it be as business as possible.
I find that one of the most useful things to do in situations like that, and whether it's in my office, in a conversation, no matter where, is I begin to speak in a softer and softer voice, very quietly, very slowly. Do your best to de-escalate by not responding in kind. Also, this may be a place to talk about the student who goes on and on and on, keeps talking in class and doesn't stop. One technique that people use is that you start walking towards that person. And inevitably, by the time you get to that person, they stop talking. So that's just one of those things to have in your back pocket should you run into such a situation. That might help. Okay, number 4. Who had number 4? Over there, what was number 4? Grading lab report. Several international students have a sentence with identical language error. You become concerned.
So we saw this kind of several different scenarios kind of playing out here. So first of all, we'd want to contact the course professor, let them know what we saw. But it becomes the question of, were these students working together and were they copying off of each other, or possibly if they were using a similar translator such as Google Translate, or if they had a textbook that was being translated into English. So we suggested looking further into the report, seeing if there was anything else that was possible, any other similarities, and then presenting that to the course professor. That was our suggestion there. And also, too, if we know where the students sit together in class, that if they are together or if they're in separate corners of the room, just to know how likely of an event cheating could be, or if it was just a translation error of what the device they were using.
Good. So explore further in the lab report to see whether this was an isolated phrase or whether it was something that was what you noticed, but then you see, oh, there was all this other stuff that was the same as well. Other thoughts? Okay. Has there been an academic integrity violation? Yes. Okay. I think it depends. I mean, it's going to depend on how crucial that phrase was to the assignment. Okay, whether it was just poor use of English that they were struggling with. So that's why you noticed the error, and they may have been talking about how to phrase something, not talking about the substance of the lab report, but rather how to phrase something, and they were getting advice on that, the kind of advice that one might get from a writing tutor or someplace else. They got it from somebody who didn't help them exactly because they ended up with the same odd turn of a phrase. But I would say that may be something where you have the opportunity to intervene and say, look, I noticed this. Okay? Once you've seen that nothing of substance for the course was plagiarized, copied from one another, that you just want to alert the student to how it looks and where they might get more appropriate help that wouldn't cross the line. Yes?
I'm pretty sure for a lot of assignments, people who are going to cheat will cheat multiple times off of the same people. So you could also, because I've already run into an issue where 2 homeworks I see are identically wrong. And I just told the professor, and he's going to track it for the next couple weeks to make sure that they're not turning in the same assignment every single week.
Yes, people who turn to their friends tend to have the same friend next week that they had this week, or the same friend who took the course last semester while they're taking it this semester. I think the important thing here is to have clarity to the extent possible, and you might help your faculty develop some clarity as what is acceptable collaboration. I'll tell you that when I teach economics, I tell students to work together on the problem sets. The only thing I ask is that they all turn in their own written answers. That I view the problem sets as part of the pedagogy of the course. Don't tell any future students who take the course from me. They look like they count towards your grade. I'm not dishonest in how I describe it, but if you do the math, they really hardly count towards your grade because I view it as part of the pedagogy, not part of the evaluation. But I know that it has to look like it's part of your grade in order to get students to spend time doing it. Faculty really vary a lot on what is acceptable collaboration. But being clear about that, when it's not clear, you should assume you're not allowed to collaborate at all. But what is acceptable collaboration should be clarified. But once someone crosses the line, I think it's important to handle that as an academic integrity violation, not wait and see if they cross the line several times. If you think there's been a lack of clarity that first time, well, then that's an instructional moment. Okay, not necessarily a violation, an opportunity to clarify the rules, but then carry it forward. Other questions? Okay, number 5. Okay, grading homework. 3 students have identical answers, including a spelling error, important term they're asked to define. Should be completely individual, not as a group. Talk to each student, and each student claims they completed the assignment on their own. Which group had that? And what are your thoughts?
You go to the instructor of record, and
You've all learned this phrase, instructor of record, today.
You go to the instructor of record and inform them of the spelling errors, and the instructor then goes to undergraduate studies. You don't go to undergraduate studies, but you immediately report to the faculty member, and even if they, according to the question, even if they admit to copying off of one another, your response does not change. You still go to the instructor of record, and the instructor decides what happens.
Right. If you have concerns that there might have been an academic integrity violation, you should talk to the instructor of record. You should talk to the course head to help you determine that that's the person who's setting all of the guidelines for how the course is going to operate. Okay? If you think there's been some egregious cheating that the faculty member is ignoring, I don't want to put you in the position of snitching on your faculty. But if you're so moved because it was that egregious, let me know. And we can explore further in ways that protect you to the extent possible. But in general, you should not be bringing forward academic integrity violations to me. You should be taking them to the head of the course, who is expected to refer those to me about how to move forward. Other questions? Comments on that? And the last one, 4 to 5 page paper, contains large sections of plagiarized text. You discover that, you Google, and you find the original source. There are no citations throughout the document. So which groups had number 6?
I have one of the greater numbers.
Okay. Your thoughts?
So any course that obviously has writing is going to have like probably in the syllabus is going to have, what the consequences are for plagiarism. So, I mean, the answer is just follow that. If it's, give the student a 0, give them the 0, and probably notarize, make sure that your professor or your instructor knows, and probably also the student should know that there was a problem and what that was. Did I miss anything?
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Right.
pretty much it.
The important thing is that you let the faculty member know that you have that concern. If the student is coming to you and saying, why didn't I get my paper back in class? You can tell that student that, you had some concerns and you had to pass it along. You're not responsible for making these determinations. Even the course head is not responsible for making the determinations. If the student says, I didn't plagiarize, the student can ask for a hearing from an academic standing panel, an academic integrity panel, and that would hear out the student, hear out the the faculty member for why there was a concern, and carry it from there. The important things that you might know from having done the pre-work is that for a first violation, the faculty member can choose failure on the assignment up to failure in the course. The important thing is that even on a first violation, that it gets reported to me and to the Office of Student Conduct. And the way I always explain that to faculty is that faculty have a wide range of views about how to handle a first academic integrity violation. Some think it's a minor thing that should be handled in a small way and kept small. And I always ask them, would you feel differently if you knew this was a second violation? There's very little variation in the answer there. They always tell me, oh, absolutely, if this was a second violation, I think that's a serious matter for the student. At which point I quietly say, well, the only way we know it's a second violation is if you report the first violation. Ah, okay, the light bulb goes on. I deal with this across 5,000 students and hundreds of faculty. Any individual faculty member may not have spent as much time thinking about how the whole system has to work. And so sometimes it just needs a little bit of explanation. Other questions about academic integrity, about any of these scenarios? Okay, well, if not, thank you. And again, thank you for all the work you're going to be doing throughout the semester in your new role.
Please join me in thanking Dean Wolkowitz.